Today we're going to talk about the new DJI Mavic Pro in comparison to the Phantom 4 and also in comparison to most of the other mid-range quadcopters and hexes on the market. So these two could be called the state-of-the-art in the consumer segment. When it comes to price, both of them are really in the same range. If you get a package with the DJI Phantom 4 along with a couple batteries and it comes in the foam case, that's going to be in the area of $1,200, $1,300, whereas the package for the Mavic Pro is in the same range if you get the case and the extra batteries. So for all effective purposes, these units are the same price. So who might want one or the other? The Mavic Pro has one feature that's over and above any consumer drone camera made, and that's portability. That's both in lightweight and in size. On the screen here, I've put the volume or the size of the popular consumer drones as well as the weights. As you can see, the Mavic is well smaller than some of the others. For instance, it's 1/10 of the cubic inches of the unique Typhoon H, which we reviewed earlier in the year. It's about 1/4 the volume of a Phantom 4 in the case, or a GoPro Karma, or similar drones. The Autel X-Star would be in that vicinity also. Portability is the biggest feature of the Mavic Pro. Probably the #1 reason that a consumer might want to choose that over some of these other models. However, every aircraft is a compromise of sorts. So let's talk a little bit about what you might get or what you might not get in terms of the Mavic Pro versus the Phantom 4 and other larger machines. As you can see, the size of the Mavic Pro isn't that much smaller than the size of a Phantom once the propellers in the unit is unfolded. A lot of the portability factor is when it's completely folded and the RC control. The RC controller is much smaller, and of course it uses a smaller device, usually an iPhone 6 or something of that size range. The RC controller can also be used without the phone. It gives you a lot of status information just on the LCD screen. The Mavic Pro can also be used just with the phone for close-in use, but very few hobbyists are really going to use it that way. If you're used to the sticks, it's hard to get used to controlling something through an app. Phantom 4 is a much larger RC remote, but that's just the point. You have a much larger screen. The screen is approximately 2.5 times the usable volume of an iPhone 6, and it's a lot easier for photographers to determine the exact lighting conditions or to set things in the app. You're going to have a lot more screen real estate, so you're going to be able to see things much easier. When all is said and done, these are flying cameras. So we really have to take a look at the camera and the gimbal and then talk a little bit about their capabilities to determine which one might suit us better. So the Mavic Pro, the camera and gimbal are really, really tiny. It's actually an amazing feat of engineering when you look at it. It's hard to imagine how small it is without having one in your hand. It's truly tiny, and it has quite respectable image quality, but with some limitations we'll talk about. The camera on the Phantom 4 is sort of a perfected version of the one that started out on the Phantom 2 Vision and then on the Phantom 3, but much heavier duty. It has a U-shaped heavy bracket where the camera is supported from both sides. It's quite robust. A bunch of the gimbal and shock is back up inside the quadcopter where it's protected. So it's a lot heavier duty. Also has a much larger lens, and DJI would have had a lot more design and engineering flexibility in terms of getting the most out of the sensor and camera in the Phantom 4. For those who aren't very picky about image quality, they're going to see what comes out of both of these units as being somewhat similar, but there are differences. To give you some examples, the Mavic Pro has a tap to focus on the camera. This is both good and bad. If you don't set up properly and tap the right place on the screen, you're going to get an out of focus shot. That's not true with the Phantom 4, where the camera is fixed focus and it pretty much will keep everything within a reasonable level of focus. This is a nice system for closer in because of that tap to focus, because now you can, if you're doing real estate photography or cars, taking photography of cars or people at relatively close range, this tap to focus is going to be very nice. In my trials, the still picture is somewhat similar. You can get a very good still image out of this and out of this. The video, there may be a little bit of difference. The Mavic Pro makes some compromises. For instance, DJI recently announced that 1080 60 frames per second, which is a mode that I shoot in quite often, does not work well on the Mavic Pro. That in fact, all video mode should be at 30 frames per second or less. That's not true with the Phantom 4, which easily can take 60 frames a second in a number of its modes, and even more in some modes. In terms of using either quadcopter on a day-to-day basis, there are some advantages to this taller landing gear. First of all, a lot of us hand catch. That means when it comes down, we know how to grab it by the landing gear and shut off the motors. It's going to be difficult to do if you can do it at all on the Mavic Pro. It might actually be dangerous to do it because of the bottom sensors and because you really don't have anywhere to grab. Also, this unit tends to sit up higher in the grass, dirt, or gravel because of those landing gears, whereas this is much, much closer to the ground. In fact, this is actually the landing gear here on the Mavic Pro. So you're really within 3/4 of an inch of the ground. Another important point is maturity and third-party applications. Phantom 4 can use a lot of the additional apps, for instance, for flying waypoints or for agriculture or mapping and things like that. I'm sure they're going to come up with apps for the Mavic Pro, but as it stands now, the Phantom 4 has them available. So those people that need the extra features that those apps provide, they're better off choosing a Phantom 4. In terms of overall ruggedness, my assumption is that a unibody like the Phantom 4, where it's made with a single shell, the heavy-duty landing gear that can really take a lot of abuse when it's hitting things, crashing, is going to fare better in terms of crashes and drops than something like this. Another difference between these two craft is the extended warranty. With a Phantom 4, you can buy DJI Care, or you can buy from a third party, such as Neary Aerial, and they usually cover all the damage in terms of operator errors and crashes. With the Mavic Pro, you have to buy it through DJI, and it's called DJI Refresh. It's $99, but it will cost you $79 to get a replacement aircraft after you crash yours, and then $129 the third time. So you're only entitled to your original and 2 other additional crashes. And while the original warranty is cheap, it costs you to replace it. Whereas with the Phantom 4, it doesn't. I highly recommend anybody who buys a Mavic Pro buy the DJI Refresh. I won't say the same with the Phantom 3 and a Phantom 4. My experience is that a conservative pilot who treats a Phantom 3 or a Phantom 4 properly is unlikely to have much damage to the craft. Again, it's a little bit more robust. You're not dealing with that tiny gimbal and it being so close to the ground. So on the Mavic Pro, I would buy the DJI Refresh. On the Phantom 4, it's optional. One part that we haven't talked about yet is the fun factor. And if you really need to have just one drone to do everything, there's something to be said for the Mavic Pro for a couple reasons. First of all, you can take it out, put it into sport mode, take it out to a wide open park and use the RC controller without your FPV and just buzz around and practice. That's something that you generally aren't going to do with the larger Phantoms. Also, DJI is coming up with the goggles which are going to tie into it for a true FPV experience. So for the person who really likes to fly around a lot and then only sometimes take pictures and video, this could definitely provide an all-in-one package. Of course, you're going to have quite an invoice when you're done with the Mavic Pro, extra batteries, and the new goggles. I think the Mavic Pro makes a great addition to the stable of drones that some of the prosumers or enthusiasts might have. If I had to have one model, it would be the Phantom 4. I think this is my summary regarding the Mavic Pro and the Phantom 4, and even against some of the other consumer quads out on the marketplace. I think the Mavic Pro makes a great addition to the stable of drones that some of the prosumers or enthusiasts might have. If I had to have one model, it would be the Phantom 4. I think it's the most advanced consumer drone. I think it's the most advanced consumer camera drone in the price range, right around $1,000, $1,100, depending on what type of a discount you can find. This is truly the most amazing piece of technical innovation there is, but that doesn't mean it's the proper tool for everyone. So a lot of people might prefer to have this and use this for when they're doing most of their video shooting, but use this when they maybe need a little more stealth, when they need to travel, and things like that. So I look at the Mavic Pro as more of an addition than a replacement for the Phantom 4 or even the Phantom 3. Those of you that have a Phantom 3 Advanced or Phantom 3 Pro or Phantom 4, I still think you have the best mid-range camera drone on the market today. In the description below, I've linked to an article comparing all the modern camera drones available at the end of 2016. I think if you are trying to make a decision regarding these two or even against some other popular consumer drones, it would make a good read. Thanks.